The crimson haze of orbital station Nexus 7 cast eerie shadows across the floating debris collection zone. Maddox adjusted his patchwork environmental suit, grimacing as the worn fabric strained against his shoulders. Years of squeezing through narrow crevices, hunting for salvageable technology, had left permanent wear patterns across the joints. His labored breathing echoed inside his helmet as he propelled himself from one twisted fragment to another, the magnetic soles of his boots creating hollow metallic clicks with each careful step. The sound resonated through his bones, a familiar rhythm to his solitary work. "Just one decent find today," he muttered, eyes scanning the field with practiced precision. "Something to keep the collectors off my back for a week." This quadrant had only recently been cleared for salvage operations, the aftermath of a decommissioned military satellite that had finally surrendered to gravity's persistent pull. The station's authority corps had already harvested what they considered valuable, but Maddox had learned through bitter experience that their definition of worthless often left plenty for those willing to dig deeper. His handheld analyzer emitted a soft pulse, indicating a faint energy signature somewhere ahead. Following the strengthening signal, Maddox navigated toward a contorted piece of metal that might have once served as a storage compartment bulkhead. The plasma cutter in his hand hummed to life, its blue-white beam slicing through the warped panels with surgical precision, revealing a sealed container nestled within. His pulse quickened as he worked the container's locking mechanism, hoping against hope for medical nanites or quantum cells, items that could fetch enough credits to keep his life support systems running for half a year. Instead, he found a helmet. The design was unmistakably military, but unlike anything in the hegemony's current arsenal or the Frontier Coalition's ragtag equipment. Not even the Meridian Trading Guild used this configuration. It was constructed of some dark composite material with peculiar azure markings etched along its contours. Despite appearing ancient, it showed no signs of structural degradation. As Maddox rotated it in his hands, something caught his attention. A small emblem engraved near the base, partially obscured by accumulated grime. It wasn't a standard military designation or rank indicator. The symbol was cruder, seemingly hand-carved, two half-moons facing each other, connected by a single line, like twin worlds joined by an impossible bridge. Maddox frowned, uneasy. Military hardware always left a sour taste in his mouth. His parents had perished during the Meridian uprisings, bystanders caught in a conflict they had no stake in. Throughout his childhood, he'd heard countless stories of commanders sending thousands to their deaths while observing safely from orbit. The entire concept of organized warfare disgusted him. The senseless destruction, the waste of resources, the blind obedience to hierarchies built on suffering. Better than empty hands, he thought, securing the helmet to his collection sack despite his reservations. Military artifacts always fetched decent prices from collectors, regardless of how much blood had been spilled in their acquisition. Back in his cramped habitation pod, Maddox examined his find under the harsh illumination of his workbench. The helmet was heavier than anticipated, and the internal components far more sophisticated than the rudimentary breather mask he used during salvage expeditions. Curious, he wiped away decades of accumulated dust with a cleaning cloth, revealing an activation panel near the base. "Probably dead anyway," he murmured, but pressed the panel nonetheless. To his astonishment, azure light flickered across the interior display. Then a crisp, synthetic voice emanated from within. "Neural interface detected. Scanning. Genetic signature identified." Maddox froze, his hand still resting on the helmet. This was military-grade technology. Dangerous. Possibly illegal. He should surrender it to the station authorities, or better yet, jettison it back into the debris field and forget he ever found it. Before he could decide, the voice spoke again, its tone shifting to something almost human, surprisingly warm. "Welcome, Commander. You were killed 13 years ago." Maddox's breath caught in his throat. "What?" He turned the helmet over in his hands, examining it more carefully. Against every instinct for self-preservation, he slipped it over his head. The universe exploded into light and agony. His consciousness flooded with images, a battlefield on a world with unfamiliar topography, skies of vibrant teal streaked with plasma fire, the sensation of blood, warm and viscous, yet somehow not his own. Faces of beings he'd never encountered. Violet-skinned creatures with eyes like liquid gold, shouting orders as vessels burned in orbit above them. Then darkness. When consciousness returned, Maddox found himself sprawled across the floor of his habitation pod, the helmet still attached to his head, now whispering a continuous stream of military codes and tactical assessments. His heart hammered against his ribs, but strangest of all was the profound sense of certainty that washed over him, a conviction he'd never experienced before. A memory flashed through his mind, except it wasn't his memory. Blood pooling beneath combat boots, the acrid smell of burning circuitry, a violet-skinned soldier dying in his arms, golden eyes dimming as life ebbed away. "No," Maddox gasped, clutching at his head. "That's not me. That's not my memory." Without conscious decision, his body moved toward the communications console in his pod. His fingers danced across the controls with practiced efficiency, bypassing security protocols he'd never learned. Part of him watched in horror as another part, a foreign, invasive presence, took control. "Signal detected," the helmet announced. "Distress beacon active. Fleet signature confirmed." "What fleet?" Maddox asked, his voice strained. "What am I doing? Stop." He tried to pull away from the console, but his hands continued their work, driven by muscle memory that wasn't his own. "Executing final protocol," the helmet replied. "Awakening the survivors." A map materialized in his vision, projected onto the helmet's visor, a distant sector unmarked on any chart he'd ever seen, with a pulsing light indicating the source of the signal. "This doesn't make sense," Maddox muttered, finally regaining control of his hands. He backed away from the console, trembling. "I'm not a commander. I'm a scavenger." He caught his reflection in a darkened screen, his face, but with an expression he'd never worn, a hardness in the eyes that didn't belong to him. "If I'm not the commander," he whispered, "then who is the one who remembers the pain of someone else's death? Where does my thinking end and his begin?" But even as he spoke, his mind filled with tactical analyses, battlefield assessments, and combat maneuvers he'd never learned. His body tense with muscle memory that wasn't his own, hands reaching for weapons he'd never carried. The helmet system beeped an urgent warning. "Defense satellite activated. Weapons locked. Evasive action recommended." Maddox glanced at his scanner and felt his blood run cold. An ancient defense drone, dormant for centuries, had come online in orbit above him, and it was targeting his position. "No, no, no," he stammered, stumbling toward the door. He needed to reach his vessel, a salvage scout skiff barely worth the fuel it consumed, but fast enough to outrun standard pursuit crafts. He reached the docking bay just as the first energy pulse struck the station, rocking the structure and sending debris raining down around him. Alarms blared as the atmospheric containment fields fluctuated. Maddox launched his craft with reckless speed, the helmet continuing to feed him flight paths and evasion tactics. For a moment, he thought he might escape. Then 3 concentrated energy beams converged on his vessel's starboard thruster. The ship spiraled out of control, plummeting toward the planet's surface. Impact was a blur of twisted metal and searing pain. When Maddox regained consciousness, he found himself pinned in the wreckage of his ship. The strange helmet was cracked but still functional. Blood trickled down his forehead as he struggled to free himself from the twisted hull plating. A shadow fell across the shattered view screen. Maddox looked up to see a figure silhouetted against the harsh sunlight, tall and lithe, holding what appeared to be a curved energy weapon. As his vision cleared, he realized with a jolt that the figure had violet skin, just like the aliens in the visions that had overwhelmed him when he first put on the helmet. The alien approached cautiously, weapon raised. It was female, Maddox realized, with golden eyes that regarded him with a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. She wore combat armor that seemed both ancient and advanced, marked with the same azure symbols that adorned the helmet. "You wear his face," she said, her voice accented, but understandable. "How is this possible?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Maddox gasped, still struggling to free himself. "Please help me." Suddenly, the alien's expression transformed from suspicion to raw, unfiltered rage. She lunged forward, pressing her weapon against his throat with such force that he could barely breathe. "Is this some cruel joke?" she hissed, her golden eyes now burning with an intensity that made Maddox's blood run cold. Did they send you to mock us? To wear his face like a mask? I don't, Maddox choked out, know what you're talking about. I watched him die, she screamed, her composure completely shattered. I held him as his blood soaked into my armor. I closed his eyes. Each sentence was punctuated by her pressing the weapon harder against his throat, her violet skin flushing to a deeper shade with emotion. Just as Maddox thought she would kill him, the alien's expression changed again. She stepped back abruptly, her weapon still aimed, but no longer pressing against his flesh. Her hands were trembling. Lyra, control yourself, she muttered, clearly speaking to herself. This isn't him. Cannot be him. She took several deep breaths before addressing Maddox again, her voice forcibly calmer, but with an undercurrent of barely contained emotion. That helmet, she said, gesturing with her weapon. It belonged to Commander Valen Sarnath, the commander of the Lost Fleet, the last hope of my people. I found it in a debris field, Maddox explained, wincing as he finally pulled his leg free from the twisted metal. I'm a scavenger. I'm not this commander. The alien narrowed her eyes. Then why does it respond to you? That neural interface only works with the commander's genetic signature. Before Maddox could answer, the helmet spoke again, this time projecting its voice externally. Tactical Officer Lyra identified. Authorization confirmed. The commander has returned as planned. The alien, Lyra, took a step back, her weapon wavering. Impossible. I watched him die. I'm not him, Maddox insisted, finally extricating himself from the wreckage. He stood unsteadily, hands raised in a gesture of peace. I don't know why this thing thinks I am, but I'm just a scavenger from the outer colonies. My name is Maddox. Lyra circled him slowly, her movements predatory and graceful. Take off the helmet. Maddox complied, revealing his face fully. Lyra studied him intently, her expression unreadable. You have his eyes, she said finally, but you are not him. The commander was older, hardened by war. She lowered her weapon slightly. Yet the helmet obeys you. Why? I have no idea, I'll admit it. It activated when I found it. Showed me visions. A battle. People like you. And it keeps talking about some fleet that's supposed to be dead. Lyra's golden eyes flashed. Not dead. Lost. Scattered. Forgotten. She gestured to the barren landscape around them. This world was once our strongest colony. Now it's a graveyard. She pointed at the helmet in Maddox's hands. That signal you activated has been silent for centuries. Her voice trailed off, a mixture of hope and apprehension crossing her features. There's a distress beacon, Maddox confirmed. The helmet showed me coordinates. Lyra was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she lowered her weapon completely. I will take you to my ship, she said. If what you say is true, if the beacon is active again after all this time, I need to see for myself. And then? Maddox asked. Lyra's expression hardened. Then we'll see if you live or die, human who wears the commander's face. Lyra's ship was hidden in a ravine several kilometers from the crash site. Unlike Maddox's salvage vessel, her craft was sleek and purposeful, clearly designed for stealth and combat rather than transport. The interior was cramped but efficient, with controls similar to those he had seen in his visions. You're the last? Maddox asked as Lyra prepared for launch. The last of my unit, she corrected, not looking up from the navigation console. The last of the commander's direct subordinates. Others survived, scattered across the fringe systems, hiding from those who would finish what they started centuries ago. Which was what, exactly? Lyra's hands paused over the controls. Genocide, she said simply. The systematic eradication of my species. We were too different, too powerful, too unpredictable for human comfort. Maddox felt a chill run down his spine. I don't understand. If humans were trying to wipe out your people, why would a human commander help you? Lyra's hands curled into fists, and for a moment she seemed to struggle with herself. Then, with a sudden violent movement, she slammed her fist into the console, leaving a dent in the metal. Because Valen Sarnath was no ordinary commander, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He was created to destroy us, but chose to save us instead. She turned to face him, and Maddox was shocked to see the glimmer of tears in her golden eyes. We were winning, you know, before the betrayal, before my overconfidence led us into a trap. She rose from her seat and moved to a storage compartment, pulling out a small metal container. From it, she removed what appeared to be a holographic recording device. I keep this to remind myself of my failure, she said, activating the device. A golden-tinted image appeared between them, Lyra looking younger, more vibrant, standing beside other violet-skinned aliens in what appeared to be a war room. And there at the center of the group was a human who could have been Maddox's older brother, Commander Valen Sarneth. The Southern Territories are secure, holographic Lyra was saying, her expression confident, almost arrogant. High Seer Marek's intelligence suggests the Earth forces are retreating from the outer sectors entirely. The commander's face showed concern rather than triumph. It's too easy. They're drawing us out. With respect, Commander, a deep voice countered from outside the hologram's range. We've earned this victory. Your caution, while admirable, is unnecessary. High Seer Marek sees what he wants to see. The commander cut in sharply. He's blinded by his hatred of humans, my people. Former people, Lyra corrected in the recording, placing a hand on the commander's arm with a familiarity that suggested more than a professional relationship. The hologram flickered, then showed a different scene. The aftermath of battle. Bodies, both human and violet-skinned, littered a battlefield. Lyra, bloodied and wounded, was dragging the commander's limp form behind a crashed ship. I trusted Marek, the present-day Lyra said bitterly as they watched. He promised us intelligence that would turn the tide. Instead, he led us into an ambush. Half our forces were wiped out in minutes. The recording showed Lyra cradling the commander's head, her uniform soaked with his blood. Stay with me, her recorded voice pleaded. Valen, please, we need you. I need you. The commander's lips moved, but no sound emerged from the recording. Whatever his final words were, they remained between him and Lyra. She shut off the device abruptly, her face a mask of carefully controlled pain. He died because I was too proud, too eager for victory. And Marek, he disappeared after the battle, went into hiding with his loyalists. Her golden eyes met Maddox's. Until now, apparently. Marek? Maddox asked. He's still alive? High Seer Marek is very much alive, Lyra confirmed grimly. And if he discovers that the commander's protocol has activated, that someone wears his face and carries his authority, she let the implication hang in the air. Marek never forgave Valen for being human, for choosing caution over vengeance. She returned to the pilot's seat, her movements precise but tense, and Marek never forgave me for loving him. The ship lifted off with barely a sound, accelerating through the atmosphere with a smoothness Maddox's salvaged vessel could never have achieved. Once they broke orbit, Lyra input the coordinates from the helmet signal. She was silent for a long time, her golden eyes occasionally darting to Maddox as if measuring him against some internal standard. Finally, she spoke. You should know that where we're going, there's no guarantee of safety, she said. If the beacon is active after all this time, others may have detected it too. Earth forces, scavengers, or worse. I understand, Maddox replied. Do you? Lyra's voice was sharp. You're a scavenger, not a soldier. This isn't your fight. She gestured to a small escape pod built into the side of her vessel. I can set coordinates for the nearest neutral outpost. You can take the helmet with you, sell it if you want. Walk away from all of this. Maddox blinked in surprise. You trust me with the helmet after everything you've said about its importance? The helmet chose you, Lyra said simply. Who am I to argue? But that doesn't mean you have to accept what comes with it. She set the ship to autopilot and stood. I'll prepare the pictah. You have until we reach the next nav point to decide. True to her word, Lyra readied the escape pod, loading it with enough supplies for Maddox to reach safety. When the ship's system announced their approach to the nav point, she led him to the pod's entrance ramp. Last chance, she said. Step on that ramp and you can return to your life. Stay and everything changes. Maddox stood at the threshold, the helmet clutched in his hands. Freedom waited on the other side. No battles, no responsibilities, no alien politics or ancient vendettas. Just the simple life of a scavenger he'd always known. He placed one foot on the ramp, feeling the metal vibrate beneath his boot. Then he looked down at the helmet, at the twin crescents carved into its base. He thought of the visions that had flooded his mind, the memories of battles and sacrifice that weren't his own. Slowly, he withdrew his foot from the ramp and turned to face Lyra. He said nothing, but his eyes, suddenly resolute, told her everything she needed to know. Lyra nodded once, a hint of respect in her expression. "It will take approximately 14 hours to reach the beacon coordinates," she informed him. "I suggest you rest. If we find what I think we might, you'll need your strength." "For what?" Lyra's golden eyes met his. "To prove you're worthy of wearing that helmet." Maddox tried to sleep, but his mind was too full of questions and the strange new instincts that had awakened within him. He studied the helmet instead, tracing the azure markings with his fingers. Occasionally, it would whisper tactical assessments or fragments of battle plans, as if the consciousness inside it was stirring from a long slumber. More troubling were the dreams, or memories, that flashed behind his eyelids whenever he closed them. A teal sky torn by plasma fire. The weight of responsibility for thousands of lives. The feel of a weapon in his hands that he'd never held. A conversation with a violet-skinned woman, Lyra but younger, about sacrifice and duty. He jerked awake from a half-sleep, sweat beading on his forehead. In the dream, he had been dying, feeling his life bleed away in the dirt of an alien world, speaking final words he couldn't remember upon waking. "Am I going mad?" he whispered to himself, touching his face to reassure himself of his identity. "Am I still Maddox, or am I becoming him?" The thought terrified him more than the defense drone had. Being hunted was one thing. Losing himself, being erased and overwritten by another consciousness, was something else entirely. "Tell me about him," Maddox said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for hours. The commander, not just what he did, but who he was. He needed to understand the man whose thoughts seemed to be infiltrating his own. Lyra didn't immediately respond, and Maddox thought she might ignore the question entirely. But eventually she engaged the autopilot and turned to face him. Her eyes fell on the helmet in Maddox's hands, specifically on the crude symbol at its base. She reached out, her violet fingers tracing the twin crescents with a gentleness Maddox hadn't seen from her before. "That wasn't part of the original design," she said softly. "He carved it himself the night before our last battle." "What does it mean?" "Valen Sarnath was a genetically engineered human," she continued, pulling her hand away. "Created by Earth's military high command to lead the campaign against my people, the Halori. They designed him to understand us, to think like us, to anticipate our tactics." Her expression darkened. "To exploit our weaknesses." But he turned against them. He saw the truth of what they planned. Not containment, not even conquest, but complete annihilation. Lyra's voice was steady, but Maddox could sense the old pain beneath her words. "He warned us. Then he did something no one expected. He brought an entire battle fleet to our aid." "He defected," Maddox said, understanding dawning. "He gave everything to save a species not his own." "We fought together for 3 years," Lyra confirmed, "evading Earth's forces, trying to evacuate as many of my people as possible." She tapped the symbol on the helmet. This was his creation. 2 worlds, human and Halori, with a bridge between them. Not separate, not enemies, but connected. He believed neither could survive without the other. Her golden eyes grew distant. In the final battle, he was mortally wounded. His last act was to initiate some protocol, something he never explained to any of us. Then he died in my arms. Maddox looked down at the symbol with new understanding. "And now, centuries later, the protocol activates and finds me." "So it seems," Lyra agreed, skepticism evident in her tone. "Though why the commander's final plan would involve a scavenger from the hegemony, I cannot fathom." "That makes 2 of us," Maddox muttered. They spent the remainder of the journey in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Maddox tried to reconcile the tactical knowledge flooding his mind with his identity as a simple salvager. Occasionally, he would find himself analyzing the ship's systems or plotting defense strategies for scenarios he'd never encountered, reflexes that weren't his own. When they finally reached the coordinates, Lyra slowed the ship to a near stop. Before them loomed a massive debris field, the remains of what must have been an enormous space battle. Twisted hull fragments and shattered weapons platforms drifted in the void, a graveyard of metal and memory. There's nothing here, Maddox said, disappointment weighing his words. Wait, Lyra countered, manipulating the sensors. There's something at the center of the field, a power signature, faint but steady. She navigated the ship carefully through the debris, following the energy reading. As they penetrated deeper into the field, a shape began to emerge from the darkness, a massive vessel nearly intact despite the destruction surrounding it. The Ascendant, Lyra whispered, her voice tinged with awe. The commander's flagship. The ship was enormous, dwarfing Lyra's vessel as they approached. Despite centuries of drift, its hull remained largely intact, though darkened by time and battle damage. As they drew closer, running lights activated along its length, responding to some signal from the helmet in Maddox's hands. It recognizes you, Lyra said, glancing at him. Or rather, it recognizes what it believes you to be. They docked in a cavernous bay, the ancient systems still operational enough to secure Lyra's ship and restore atmosphere to the immediate area. As the airlock cycled, Maddox felt a strange sense of familiarity wash over him, as if he'd walked these decks countless times before. The flagship's interior was cold and dark, emergency lighting casting long shadows down the corridors. Their footsteps echoed as Lyra led the way, following the helmet's increasingly urgent directions. Occasionally, they passed signs of the crew's hasty departure. Personal effects abandoned, doors left ajar, a meal half-eaten in the ship's galley. Where is everyone? Maddox asked, his voice hushed in the tomb-like quiet. Dead or evacuated to the colony worlds, Lyra replied. This ship was meant to be our last stand if all else failed. The helmet directed them to the heart of the vessel, a vast chamber that Maddox somehow knew was the strategic command center. As they entered, lights activated automatically, illuminating rows of cylindrical containers lining the walls. Each was frosted with ice, but through the clouded surfaces, Maddox could make out the silhouettes of bodies within. Cryogenic preservation, Lyra breathed, rushing to the nearest container and wiping away the frost. Inside was one of her kind, a violet-skinned male, his features frozen in an expression of grim determination. They're alive, dozens of them. Maddox moved deeper into the chamber, drawn by some instinct he couldn't explain. At the far end, separated from the others, stood a single container. Unlike the others, this one was clear, the ice having long since melted away. Inside was a human figure, a man in his 40s with a face that sent a shock of recognition through Maddox's system. It was like looking into a mirror that showed an older, harder version of himself. The commander, he whispered. Lyra joined him, her hand reaching out to touch the container's surface. Valen, she said softly, a wealth of emotion in that single word. Maddox stared at the face of the dead commander, trying to reconcile the man before him with the visions in his mind and the reflection he saw each morning. I don't understand. I'm not related to him. I'm nobody. The helmet thinks otherwise, Lyra pointed out. As if responding to her words, the helmet activated, projecting a holographic image between them, a recording of the commander himself, seemingly made in his final hours. His face was gaunt, streaked with blood, but his eyes burned with purpose. If you're seeing this, then the final protocol has been activated, the recording began. I am Commander Valen Cerneth, a genetically engineered human created by Earth's military to lead the campaign against the Hilori people. He glanced off camera, as if checking that he was alone. What my creators didn't anticipate was that in making me understand the enemy, they would make me see the truth that there was no enemy, only a civilization Earth feared because it couldn't control it. The commander's image flickered, and he winced in pain before continuing. I couldn't stand by and watch a genocide. So I defected, bringing with me the fleet I commanded and as much of the Hilori leadership as I could save. We've been running ever since, fighting when we must, hiding when we can. He leaned closer to the camera. But I'm dying, and without me, Earth's forces will never stop hunting the survivors. So I've created a contingency, a signal host, someone who can carry on what I started. That's you, Lyra whispered to Maddox. The commander continued. You who are watching this, you are not my clone, not my child, but you share a unique genetic marker that my scientists isolated, a marker that statistically would only appear in one individual within several million. The helmet was programmed to find you, to download the tactical knowledge you would need, to give you the authority to command what remains of our fleet. Maddox shook his head in disbelief. This is insane. I'm a scavenger, not a military leader. Neither was I originally, the holographic commander replied, as if anticipating his protest. I was created to be a weapon. I chose to be a shield instead. His expression softened slightly. I'm giving you the same choice. The recording ended, leaving Maddox and Lyra in stunned silence. Finally, Lyra spoke. He planned this, all of it, even his own death. She looked at Maddox with new eyes. He chose you to continue his work. But why me? Maddox demanded. What makes him think I'm capable of? An alarm cut through the air, harsh and insistent. The helmet projected a tactical display showing multiple vessels approaching the flagship. We've been found, Lyra said, moving quickly to a control panel. The signal must have been detected. The display identified the approaching ships. Halori vessels, Sentinel class. Lyra's expression shifted from alarm to confusion. My people, but why would they? Because they received the same signal we did, Maddox realized. But they don't know about me, about the commander's plan. They'll think it's a trap, Lyra agreed, or worse, that someone is desecrating his memory. She activated the communication system. This is Tactical Officer Lyra, identification code Sigma 751. I am aboard the Ascendant. Hold your fire. A voice responded almost immediately, tense with suspicion. Lyra, we thought you were dead. What's happening? Our sensors detect a human life sign aboard. The commander's final protocol has activated, Lyra explained. I need to speak with High Seer Marek immediately. There was a pause, then a different voice responded, older, with an unmistakable authority that made even Lyra straighten her posture. Tactical Officer Lyra, after all these years. High Seer Marek's voice was smooth, cultured, with an underlying current of steel. I thought you perished with your human commander. I survived, Lyra replied, her tone carefully neutral. As did you, High Seer. Yes, I survived, Marek agreed. I survived to keep our people alive while you disappeared into the void. I survived to build something from the ashes of your commander's failed strategy. Maddox watched Lyra's face harden, saw how she struggled to keep her composure. This was clearly more than a political disagreement. There was personal history here, old wounds being reopened. Transmitting visual confirmation, Marek demanded. Lyra hesitated, then activated the visual feed. On the screen appeared another of her kind. Older, his white skin faded to a pale lavender, but his golden eyes were sharp and penetrating. He was dressed in elaborate robes with military insignia, a stark contrast to Lyra's battle-worn armor. Despite his age, he radiated power and absolute conviction. Marek's eyes widened as he took in the scene, and Maddox standing beside her. For a moment, genuine shock broke through his composed exterior. What is this? The elder demanded, recovering quickly. Who is this human? High Seer Marek, Lyra began. I can see who it appears to be. Marek cut her off, his voice cold but controlled, a calculating look replacing his initial shock. What abomination is this? Some clone of the commander? Some Earth trick? Maddox was struck by the elder's charisma. Even through a screen, his presence was commanding. This was not simply a fanatic. This was a leader who had held his people together through centuries of hiding and loss. His hatred might be misguided, but it came from a place of genuine care for his species. No, High Seer, Lyra assured him. This is Maddox, a scavenger who found the commander's helmet. The genetic marker. Silence, Marek roared, the careful control slipping for a moment to reveal the rage beneath. You bring this mockery aboard our sacred vessel. The commander is dead. I held a memorial for him myself, even as I cursed his human weakness. I will not have his memory defiled by this imposter. He leaned closer to the screen, addressing Maddox directly. You wear his face, but you are not him. Velen Sarnath died because he refused to strike when victory was within our grasp. His compassion for your kind was his undoing. His golden eyes narrowed. I will not make the same mistake. He turned to someone off screen. Prepare boarding parties. Secure the Ascendant and eliminate the human. Bring Lyra to me, alive. The communication cut off abruptly. Lyra's expression was grim as she turned to Maddox. "We don't have much time. They'll be here within minutes." Maddox's mind raced, the tactical knowledge implanted by the helmet offering multiple defense scenarios. But none of them felt right. He didn't want to fight Lyra's people. More than that, he had spent his life avoiding conflict, despising the military mindset that saw people as assets to be deployed and sacrificed. Now he was being asked to think like a commander, to potentially lead others into battle. "We need to show them the recording," he suggested, pushing aside the battle plans forming unbidden in his mind. "Make them understand." "High Seer Marek won't listen," Lyra said, shaking her head. "He was always the most radical of our leaders. He advocated for a counterattack against Earth even when we lacked the resources. He saw the commander's restraint as weakness." The helmet suddenly spoke. "Failsafe protocol initiating. In the absence of commander authorization, the fleet will jump to designated coordinates and self-destruct in 30 minutes. "What?" Maddox exclaimed. "No, stop that." "Unable to comply," the helmet responded. "Only Commander Valen Sarnath can countermand the failsafe." "But I'm not him," Maddox shouted in frustration. Lyra's eyes widened with understanding. The cryogenic pods, they're waking up. Indeed, the ice was receding from the containers around them, the occupants beginning to stir. If the ship self-destructs, Maddox realized, horror dawning, they all die. "Along with any chance of your people's survival," Lyra finished. The sound of the boarding party echoed down the corridor. Marek's forces had arrived. Lyra drew her weapon, positioning herself between Maddox and the entrance. "Put on the helmet," she ordered. "Try again to stop the countdown." Maddox complied, the neural interface connecting with a now familiar surge of pain and information. "System abort the fail-safe protocol," he commanded. "Voice pattern recognized but insufficient," the helmet replied. "Genetic marker confirmed but incomplete. Commander Valen Sarnath deceased. Failsafe continues." The first of Marek's warriors appeared at the entrance, weapons raised. Lyra held her ground. "Stand down," she shouted. "There are awakening survivors here." The warriors hesitated, taking in the sight of the cryogenic pods. High Seer Marek pushed through their ranks, his aged face more imposing in person, the lines of centuries of struggle etched into his features. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "What have you done, Lyra?" he demanded, his voice quieter now, but somehow more threatening. His eyes swept over the awakening Halori and their pods, and for a moment, genuine emotion flickered across his face. Hope, quickly replaced by suspicion. "All these years they were here, alive." He turned back to Lyra, rage building. "You knew? You knew? And you left them sleeping while our people scattered across the stars, hunted like animals." "I didn't know," Lyra replied, her weapon still raised. "The commander never told me about this contingency. He kept secrets from all of us." "Of course he did," Marek snarled, "because he never truly trusted us, never truly became one of us, despite your affection for him." He said the word with undisguised disgust. "He saved us," Lyra countered. "He saved some of us," Marek corrected. "The rest he led to slaughter with his half measures and refusal to strike at Earth directly." His voice rose, impassioned, and Maddox could see how this man had held followers for centuries. "I was there too, Lyra. I watched our people die because your precious commander couldn't bring himself to destroy his own kind." Maddox stepped forward, removing the helmet. "High Seer Marek, please listen. The ship's fail-safe protocol has activated. Unless we stop it, everyone aboard will die when it self-destructs." Marek's eyes narrowed as he studied Maddox. For a moment, it seemed he might actually listen. "Explain," he commanded. Quickly, Maddox outlined what they had discovered. The commander's recording, the cryogenically preserved Halori, the final protocol. "And you claim to be what?" Marek asked, his tone still suspicious, but no longer openly hostile. "Not the commander reborn, but some genetic match," Maddox confirmed. "I don't understand it fully myself, but the helmet recognized something in me. Enough to activate, but not enough to grant full command authority." Marek was silent for a long moment, considering. Around them, more of the cryogenic pods were activating, their occupants beginning to stir. 22 minutes to self-destruct, the helmet announced from where Maddox had set it down. Marek turned to his warriors. Secure the bridge. See if our systems can override the failsafe. Then, to Maddox's surprise, he addressed him directly. If what you say is true, I will not risk the lives of our people in a pointless vendetta. Relief washed over Maddox. Perhaps they could resolve this peacefully after all. The warriors moved quickly, spreading throughout the ship. Marek remained with Lyra and Maddox, his golden eyes constantly moving between them. 17 minutes to self-destruct, the helmet updated. One of Marek's warriors returned, his expression grim. We cannot override the system, High Seer. It responds only to the commander's authorization. Marek's momentary cooperation vanished. Then we evacuate our people and leave the human to his fate. He turned to Lyra. Come with us, tactical officer. Your skills are still needed. We can't evacuate everyone in time, Lyra protested, and the failsafe will destroy more than just this ship. It's linked to the entire surviving fleet. Then we have no choice, Marek decided, his voice hardening again. He gestured to his warriors. Kill the human, take the helmet. Perhaps without its chosen one, the system will reset. The warriors raised their weapons. Lyra stepped in front, her own weapon ready. You'll have to kill me first, High Seer. So be it, Marek said coldly. Your judgment has been compromised by your feelings for the commander. This imposter has exploited that weakness. 14 minutes to self-destruct, the helmet warned. Maddox looked from Lyra to Marek, then to the awakening Halori. This was exactly what he had always hated about military thinking. The cold calculation of acceptable losses, the willingness to sacrifice lives for ideology. Yet here he was, caught in the middle of a conflict centuries in the making, with lives hanging in the balance. The commander had faced this same choice, he realized. Created to destroy, he had chosen to protect. Designed as a weapon, he had become a shield. Suddenly, Maddox knew what he had to do. He lunged for the helmet, placing it on Lyra's head before anyone could react. System, he shouted. Recognize Tactical Officer Lyra's authority. To everyone's surprise, the helmet responded. Voice pattern recognized. Secondary authorization accepted. The countdown stopped, the helmet's displays shifting from red to blue. Lyra stood tall, the commander's helmet gleaming on her head. He trusted me as well, she said softly, addressing both Maddox and Marek. He knew I would be here. Marek stared at her, his anger giving way to confusion. For the first time, he seemed truly at a loss. Lyra, what is happening? Who is this human? Not who you think, Lyra replied. Not the commander reborn, but someone chosen to carry his voice. She turned to the awakening Halori in the pods. The commander is dead. I was there. I watched him die, but I won't let you die with him. She extended her hand to Maddox, who took it hesitantly. Together they approached the communication console at the center of the chamber. If the commander trusted you with his voice, Lyra said to Maddox, then use it for him, for all of us. Maddox nodded, understanding what she was asking. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice carried to every ship, every survivor. I am not Commander Velin Sarneth, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I'm a scavenger named Maddox from the edge of a forgotten sector. But through some twist of fate, the commander chose me to find his helmet, to learn his tactics, to speak with his authority. He paused, looking at the faces around him, violet-skinned aliens who had lost everything, fought for centuries, and now stared at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Inside, he felt a strange duality that had been growing since he first put on the helmet, his own thoughts and the commander's tactical knowledge, separate yet merging, like two streams joining to form a river. When I first found the helmet, I was afraid I was losing myself, Maddox continued, his voice growing stronger, that the commander was somehow erasing me, replacing me. But that's not what's happening. He didn't want another version of himself. He wanted someone who could see with fresh eyes, who hadn't been hardened by centuries of war. He looked directly at High Seer Marek, whose expression had shifted from hostility to reluctant attention. I can't be him, Maddox continued. I won't pretend to be, but I understand now why he chose me. I can feel his memories, his pain, his hope, but I can also feel my own determination, my own desire to help. I'm not Commander Sarneth, reborn. I'm something new, a bridge between who he was and what your people need now. He took a step forward, speaking not just to Marek, but to all the awakened Halori. The commander believed that different species can live together, that conquest and genocide are never the answer, that sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is refuse to fight. But he also knew that sometimes you have to stand your ground, not with weapons, but with conviction. Maddox glanced at Lyra, who nodded encouragingly. The commander's fleet still exists. His allies still live. And now they have a chance to rebuild, not as fugitives, but as a people with a future. Maddox's voice strengthened, the tactical knowledge from the helmet merging with his own determination. I don't ask you to follow my fate. I ask you to follow what the commander believed in. A future where humans and Halori stand together, where the mistakes of the past are not repeated. The chamber fell silent as his words echoed across the fleet. Then, one by one, the awakened Halori approached, each bowing slightly to Lyra and regarding Maddox with cautious acceptance. Even High Seer Marek seemed moved, his earlier rage giving way to a grudging respect. You speak well for a human, he admitted. Perhaps there is something of the commander in you after all. Over the next few hours, more pods were activated, more survivors awakened. The flagship systems, dormant for centuries, hummed back to life under Lyra's direction. Maddox found himself in the strange position of being neither leader nor outsider, but something in between. A bridge, perhaps, between two species with a shared history of conflict and cooperation. As the revived crew dispersed to assess the ancient systems of the flagship, Maddox found himself alone on the bridge. The vast command center, designed for a full complement of officers, felt cavernous with just him standing at its heart. Through the viewport, he could see the fleet coming to life, dozens of ships illuminating after centuries of dormancy, their running lights piercing the darkness of space like awakening stars. Before him on the central console sat the commander's helmet, its neural interface quiet now, its purpose seemingly fulfilled. Maddox stared at it, this artifact that had changed his life forever, feeling the weight of expectation and history pressing down on him. He picked up the helmet, turning it in his hands, his thumb tracing over the twin crescent symbol that the commander had carved there centuries ago. A bridge between worlds. A noble idea, but one conceived in a different time by a different man. You died, Maddox said quietly to the helmet, and I lived, and that's the only real difference between us. He set the helmet down gently and reached for a laser etching tool from a nearby maintenance kit. With deliberate care, he began to carve into the metallic surface of the console. Not two crescents this time, but three intersecting arcs forming a new pattern, a symbol of his own creation. Not just a bridge between two worlds, but a convergence of many. The sound of footsteps made him pause, but he didn't turn around. He knew who it was. You don't have to do this, Lyra said from behind him. It's over. The fleet is saved. The survivors are waking. You could leave, return to your life. Maddox continued etching, his hand steady. And you, he asked without a trace of resentment. What will you do? Lyra moved to stand beside him, her golden eyes reflecting the stars beyond the viewport. I thought I could spend my life honoring the dead, she said after a moment, living for their memory. She paused, her voice softening. But I find I want to live alongside those who still breathe. She placed her hand on the console next to his, neither above nor below, but level. Equal. There was no hierarchy between them now, no shadow of the past dictating their roles. You won't be his substitute, Maddox said, meeting her gaze. And you won't be the voice of a ghost, Lyra replied with quiet certainty. They looked at each other, a moment of understanding passing between them that needed no words. Then Maddox leaned forward and activated the fleet-wide communication system. To all ships, he said, his voice clear and strong, this is a new fleet charting a new course. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We move forward to a place where none of us are obligated to be someone else, only ourselves. The bridge systems hummed with renewed energy as confirmation signals came in from across the fleet. Outside, the massive vessels began to shift formation, preparing for departure. On the flagship's hull, Engineering crews were already replacing the old military insignia with the new symbol Maddox had created. Three arcs intersecting in harmony. As the stars began to shift outside the viewport, Lyra spoke softly beside him. Next to you, the future doesn't seem so frightening. Maddox smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Everyone else is terrified of me except you. As they should be, she replied with a hint of a smile. We're making history, after all. The fleet accelerated, leaving behind the debris field that had been its tomb and cradle, moving into the vast unknown with purpose and hope. Years later, in the Museum of Interstellar Cooperation, a small exhibit drew particular attention from visitors. Behind a simple glass case sat a metal plate bearing three intersecting arcs, the first emblem of what would become known as the United Fleet. Beside it, a human child and a Halori youth paused to read the inscription. This was not the commander's fleet. This was the fleet of one who refused to become him and went further.